about that time. First off, an introduction. My name is Euan. I'm a first-year intern here at Mount Rushmore National Memorial. And on behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to thank you all for coming out and taking the chance to come to one of our great talks we have set up for you guys today. So again, this will be just a short 15-minute talk where I'll go over some of the history of the memorial, and then I'll also be showing some of the tools that they used to get it done. So first off here, I'd like to ask everybody a question, and let me just get a show of hands for if it was not your original intention to come to Mount Rushmore when you were planning the trip that brought you here. Anybody? Well, to be quite honest, even though it was everybody's intention to come here, that's kind of expected for such an iconic memorial such as Mount Rushmore. It's kind of deserving of a planned trip to come here. But even though that is true, everybody has those times during a trip where they weren't planning on doing something, but they maybe see a sign off this side of the road. Hey, let's go do that. Or on the other hand, there might be things where you were planning on doing it, but really didn't work out in the end. Maybe you didn't have enough time or you didn't have enough money. This idea was something that happened a lot to a man named Doane Robinson. Doane Robinson was the state historian for the state of South Dakota in the 1920s and 30s. You can see his bust right there on the left-hand side of the fireplace, but Doane Robinson had an idea. His idea was that he wanted to bring tourists to the Black Hills, as a source of money and, kind of a source of pride for the state. How he was going to do that is he wanted a giant sculpture here, a giant stone sculpture in one of the many rock outcroppings that you see all around the Black Hills here. Him being a state historian doesn't really have a lot of experience in doing giant rock carvings, so he has to find a man who's going to get the job done. The first person that he contacts is a man by the name of Laredo Taft. Laredo Taft was a very famous sculptor working in Chicago during that time who had received this telegram from Doane Robinson asking him to come to the Black Hills, come do this sculpture. Laredo Taft actually thinks it's a pretty good idea, except during this time he's kind of getting old. He's in his late 70s, he's not in the best health. Plus the trip that he would have to make from Chicago all the way up here to South Dakota really wouldn't take the best toll on his health, plus all the back and forth he would have to make. So he has to decline. But even as Doane Robinson receives this telegram back saying that he can't come do it, he has another man in mind. That is our man, Gutzon Borglum. Gutzon Borglum was actually working on an entirely different giant stone sculpture during the time that he receives this telegram, down at Stone Mountain in Georgia. If anybody has ever heard or seen that, you know of the giant sculpture of the three Confederate generals on that giant granite dome there. He was working on that at the time, but him being a very, very ambitious man figures, hey, maybe I can knock out two birds with one stone. And so he decides to accept. And at this point, the original idea that Doane Robinson had in his head to have Laredo Taft come here to the Black Hills didn't really work out. But even still, he's got this other great sculptor on his hands, Gutzon Borglum, who also happens to have some experience in doing giant stone carvings, especially on granite. So everything is still going well, everything is still going as planned. It's at this point where Gutzon Borglum decides to come up to South Dakota to see what Doane Robinson is talking about. And when he gets here, Doane Robinson takes him to a place called the Needles. These are the Needles right here. They're down in Custer State Park. If you've never been on the Needles Highway down there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But they're just these big granite spires that rise to the sky. And Doane Robinson's idea was actually to have Western figures carved into these needles. People like Lewis and Clark, Buffalo Bill, Chief Red Cloud, all sorts of crazy characters. And so, Gutzon Borglum doesn't really feel like this is feasible though. For one, if you look again at these, they're already really, really weathered. So if he was able to do any work on these, it really wouldn't last very long. They'd be pretty fragile. So he has to decline on that idea. He still knows that he's going to be working here, but he decides to go back down to Stone Mountain, work some more on Stone Mountain down there, and instead, he finds out that he's actually been taken off of the project by the Daughters of the Confederacy, who had commissioned him to do the project in the first place. And he does get a little mad over this, and he may smash his scale model to bits with an axe, but even though he does get a little mad over this, he knows that he also has this prospect up here in South Dakota that may bring him some fame, may bring him some fortune. So the very next summer, he comes right back up and decides to start scouting out where he's going to do this sculpture for Doane Robinson. And when he comes up, the first place that he goes to start scouting out is the top of Black Elk Peak, previously Harney Peak. If you know about Black Elk Peak or have been on the top of there, you'd know that that's the highest point here in the Black Hills. And so once Gutzon Borglum is on the top of there, he's able to survey the entire landscape, 360 degrees all around him. And looking to his northeast, he sees a mountain that's pretty broad. It's got enough granite to sculpt with. And the one main thing that he's looking for is that the mountain faces southeast. This is very important to Gutzon Borglum because of how, as the morning sun comes up in the southeast, it's going to give that sculpture the maximum amount of light during the day. And if you look at pictures of Mount Rushmore during the morning, I would say that he did a very good job of choosing this mountain. It's also around this time where Gutzon Borglum decides that instead of Western figures as Doane Robinson had wanted, he is going to instead carve presidents. In Gutzon Borglum's mind, he feels that presidents are really going to serve as a greater source of pride for the American people, being that they've been so instrumental in how our country has developed, how it's been formed. Also, there's going to be a lot more people that are going to know who the presidents are, rather than some Western figures that people may or may not know about. Gutzon Borglum has 4 men in his mind that he automatically knows are on the mountain. We've got George Washington representing the foundation of America, which should be for obvious reasons. We've got Thomas Jefferson representing the expansion of America for his role in the Louisiana Purchase. We've got Theodore Roosevelt representing the development of America for his role in the Panama Canal Treaty. And finally, we've got Thomas Jefferson representing we've got Abraham Lincoln representing the preservation of America for his role in preserving the Union during the Civil War. So now that we've got who's going to carve it, where we're going to carve it, and what we're going to carve it of, we can finally start figuring out where exactly we're going to have these presidents positioned on the mountain, what they're going to look like, maybe even what they're going to be wearing. And how Gutzon Borglum is going to figure that out is using this scale model here right behind me. This is the original scale model that Gutzon Borglum made himself. And the great thing about it is that it's made out of plaster, meaning that Gutzon Borglum can add as much plaster as he wants, or even subtract some based on if he needs to make any changes due to some unforeseen circumstances. And as he's making these changes, he's going to need to figure out how he's going to get measurements from the scale model here and take them up to the mountain. And this is where this tool comes in. This is just a little toy model right here used for demonstrations. You can see a real life, real scale version up on LinkedIn there, but this is called the pointing system. How this works is this uses 3 measurements to find any point in 3D space. What you've got here is you've got the arm rotating on the disc, so you've got the angle that the arm is coming out. You've got the horizontal distance that the arm is coming out. And then finally, you've got the vertical distance down that the string is coming to the tip, also called the plumb bob. And so again, this is going to be able to find any point in 3D space, namely where the features are going to be up on the mountain. But Gutzon Borglum is not going to take these measurements directly up to the mountain. It's going to look pretty small in comparison to what you see up there today. So he needs to use a conversion rate to blow it up to scale. And the conversion that he uses is actually pretty simple. It's that 1 inch on the scale model here is exactly 1 foot on the mountain. So just imagine for yourself, just pick any random 1 inch point on the scale model here. Just imagine that as an entire foot of solid granite up on the mountain. And so now that we've got pretty much all the math out of the way, we can start actually doing some work on the mountain itself. What's going to happen first is Gutzon Borglum is going to descend in the bosun chair you see right up there. He's going to send upon the mountain in that, and using a little red paint can, he's just going to mark on the mountain where he wants drilling done, where he wants rock taken off. And after he makes those marks, we're going to do some drilling, namely using this bit. This bit is going to go on the jackhammer you see right there, and they're just going to drill those holes wherever Guts and Borgholm wanted. And now, finally, we can get to the fun part. We're going to get to use dynamite. Dynamite is what's going to be used to remove 90% of the rock off of the mountain. And it's not just going to happen using one blast. They're going to be going through drilling, blasting for a while. And all this blasting is going to remove nearly 450,000 tons of solid granite rock off the mountain. But even though you are able to use dynamite up to a point, no matter how small you make it, you're going to need to use a bit finer touch at some point. This right here is what that's going to look like. This is called a piece of honeycomb granite. And you can pretty much see why it's called that, because of how, as they're drilling using the same bit, these holes, they're going to make them so close together that it's going to look like that honeycomb on a beehive. And what this is going to do is it's going to weaken up the rock to the point where all you need to do next is take this wedge bit, wedge it right in between those holes, and it's going to knock all that rock right off the mountain. And you can see here, from this piece of honeycomb granite, sometimes they would only need maybe 2 to 3 inches of rock to be removed after they had used all the dynamite. And so now, finally, we're pretty much down to the final product, except it's going to look a little rough. There's going to be a lot of pocket marks that are going to be on the mountain from when the drill, the bit here, is going to make all those holes in the granite. And so we need to smooth those out so that the mountain is going to be looking as good as it's going to get. This right here is just the tool for that job. This is called a bumping tool. How this works is that you've got a stream of air coming in the back here. You've got the air which is going to push the bit out. It's going to bounce off of the rock, and that's all you're going to hear for hours and hours as you're trying to smooth the mountain out, pulverizing the face of that rock so that it's going to be as smooth, to what's to be said, as smooth as a sidewalk. And so now, finally, we're pretty much down to the final product. But even still, as they're doing all this drilling, blasting, more drilling, and then finally bumping, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen after they thought they were finally finished with a certain section. A lot of changes that were not seen beforehand. One of these changes was namely the positioning of Jefferson's face. Everybody can see that Jefferson is on Washington's left-hand side, today. What you may not know is that he used to be on Washington's right-hand side, as you can see in this picture right here. You can see, it's a little small, so you may want to come up afterwards to see exactly what I'm talking about. But some of you may be able to see that they were maybe halfway done with Jefferson's face until something happened that they needed to change. A crack in the mountain. This crack made it pretty much undoable to do any more work to his face. So after $10,000 of work done, they had to blast that right off the mountain and into the rubble field. And of course move it to where it is today. But as you can see through this, there were a lot of things that they did on the mountain that they really weren't expecting on doing before. Also, as you can see from the scale model behind me, there were a lot of things that they wanted to do that didn't quite work out in the end. Again, not enough time, not enough money. But even though this is true, even though looking at the scale model here behind me, you could call Mount Rushmore unfinished, I would still say that this place is a great success. The dream that Joan Robinson had of bringing tourists to the Black Hills has pretty much been fulfilled. This place gets millions and millions of people through the years, people from all over the world, which of course includes all of you guys. So finally, I would like to thank you all for coming to Mount Rushmore National Memorial and being a part of this great experiment. Please have a nice day. Let me know if you have any questions afterward, and that's all I got from here. Thank you.